Hello and welcome into the Nittany Gritty podcast brought to you by the good folks at New Amendment. I am your host, Jon Sauber, joined once again by Penn State legend Tim Frazier. Tim, how's it going?
Man, it's all good, John. How about yourself?
Oh, it's going. Pre-Super Bowl week, whatever this weird week is between the NFC title game and actual Super Bowl week, is way too stressful for me not having any other investment other than my fanhood in it, right? Like I'm just like I'm thinking about this too much. Like I'm doing scouting reports on the Chiefs at this point. Like I'm making sure I'm prepared for my assignments next week. My wife makes fun of me because I won't wear a different jersey when they're having success. So things started going poorly. I'm superstitious, but I don't believe in them. But I don't want to be the guy that messes it up, right? Like I'm not going to be the guy that messes it up just in case. It's the excuse I always make. But like I changed jerseys when things weren't going well against the Niners after Christian McCaffrey scored, and then they blew them out. So you're welcome, everybody. I guess that was my doing on that one. That changed the fortunes. But yeah, it's a stressful week, man. Too stressful.
I think it's going to be a great game, and I think it's going to be one of the better Super Bowl games that we've seen in a while. I think with the two teams, I think it'll be, and even just the two fan bases at that, I think it's going to be one of the better games that we've seen in a long time.
Well, that's my concern. Like, can my heart handle that? We're going to find out. Like, I don't want it to be that good. Mm-hmm. I'd like to enjoy it. And me enjoying it looks a lot different than I think you enjoying it and other people enjoying it. Mm-hmm. But yeah, like it's going to be a great game. Two black quarterbacks facing off for the first time in NFL history. Pretty cool to see. You have all the storylines and stuff, like the Kelsey brothers facing each other and Andy Reid against his old team and all that stuff. But yeah, it is it's nerve-wracking, which is why I like the nice refrain of some basketball in between, right? Like, I'm a Sixers fan, too. I think I've made that known on here before. So watch that. And last night, mixed in, and this is as good of a transition as we're going to get to X's and O's this week because it wasn't pretty. Last night, Penn State taking on Purdue. And, man, sometimes you're going to face the top team in the country with the top player in the country, and sometimes you're going to look like that. And that's what happened. Purdue won by 20 with a kid who shoots 32% from three, going, I think, 9 of 12 from three in the game. And I got to tell you, man, you're just not going to win those.
That's tough. You spend all week or however many days preparing, for Zach Edey. Hey, we got to stop this. We got to be able to slow him down, from what he's done in the first game, the first meeting. And then, somebody from the bench that you didn't expect to really have that big of an impact on the game, take over the game where he was shooting lights out. And some of that stuff, you're just sitting there, you're just, watching the game. I'm just like, there's no way that's going in. And then, boom, he made it. And then he got hot. Credit to that kid, man. He made some shots. And you can only do nothing but, sometimes, when they say when guys make tough shots, man, just give him a 5 and keep it going. But he won that game for him. I think Edey did what he did, but I think the game plan was solid enough. You got to be able to take away the others, and the others for Purdue stepped up and played big. Yeah,
and that's the thing. Like, it seemed pretty clear that the game plan was to let Mason Gillis, who made those threes, by the way, you set the record or tied the record for in Mackey Arena for a Purdue player with 9, and like it seemed like the game plan was let him shoot, right, double off him onto Edey, prevent Edey from hurting you, and let a guy who's not a great shooter, like a below average shooter, let him try and beat you. And man, what are you going to do? I remember this reminded me of when I covered Indiana, they had a game against Michigan State in Assembly Hall, right? And Assembly Hall is like a pretty daunting place to play already, but this is Michigan State, Tom Izzo and everything. Indiana won that game close on the back of Justin Smith, who later transferred to Arkansas and I think now is on a two-way with the Sixers. But Justin Smith was shooting like 22% from three that year. And I think he went like 7 of 8 or 6 of 7 from three in that game. And I remember sitting in the post-game press conference listening to Tom Izzo just be like 5 times, like, I don't know which one to tell you. Like, that kid made like 6 threes. We wanted him to shoot threes and he made them. He's like, I don't know what he's supposed to do at that point, right? Like when a guy who doesn't make shots starts making shots, like you said, you kind of just have to shrug and move on. I saw some people like wanting an adjustment. I'm like, the adjustment is let the 7'4" guy dunk every possession, and that doesn't feel like a good adjustment to me. And they like the strategy was sound. They doubled. They had their 2 bigs, if you want to call them that, and Caleb Dorsey and Mikey Henn double. Those guys are only 6'8". It worked against Michigan really well. It was working against Edey, who's not that great of a passer, but that pass was right there, and he didn't have to hit it that well. And Gillis was catching, and he was shooting, and he was seemingly making everything. He came out 11 points to start the second half, by the way, and that was when you knew, like, okay, this one's over.
Like you said, you got to give him credit. You know what I mean? I don't know what the kid ate that night or before the game, whatever his pregame routine, but I'm sure, like you talked about with superstitions, I'm sure that he's gonna do that same thing for the next game. Be like, hey man, if I shoot the way I shot last game, I better do the exact same routine for the next game. But at the end of the day, you know, number one team in the country on the road, you know, you knew going in it was going to be a tough out for Penn State. But I will say I feel like the guys competed for the most part. And, you know, that's all you need. Only thing you can really ask for is you compete throughout the whole 40 minutes and continue to go and give it your all. And I feel like the guys did, even though it seemed out of reach for pretty much most of the game. But they stayed together and they competed. And that's the only thing when I'm watching the game, that's what I'm looking for, to see, you know, if guys are turning on each other, or if even when things aren't going right, do you stick together just how you were a couple of days before when Penn State was shooting lights out against Michigan.
Well, and that's the thing, like the issue for Penn State on the road so much has been like they're not making shots. Well, they shot 38% from three. That's good. Like that'll win you most games. It's just, again, number one team, number one player in the country. But like you said, to their credit, they had rebounded prior to that when they beat Michigan in the Thon game at the Bryce Jordan Center. That was an important matchup because it was sort of it was the second game of the home and home this year, one of their many home and homes in the Big Ten. And when you lose the road one, like it becomes imperative that you win the home one. And that one was never close. Like they double teamed Hunter Dickinson, and he was in a bad way out there, right? Like he was turning the ball over left and right. Easily his worst game of the season, like not even close statistically and to the eye test. Like he looked out of sorts the entire game. And like credit to Penn State, like that is, to me, to go a little bit bigger picture here, that is the brilliance of Micah Shrewsbury and the coaching staff, right? When you face them a second time, it's not going to look like it did. This was what, a month ago, if that, 3 weeks ago, that they faced them the first time, and they already drastically changed how they approached it. So that sort of insistence on evolution, right, rather than just being stagnant, be like, well, we had this game plan the first time, we just need to execute better. Like that stubbornness can hurt teams at times. Being willing to change your game plan, being willing to adjust when things aren't working, whether it's in game or game to game, is so big. And like that's a drastic change, by the way, to go from like Keba Jai is trying to guard Hunter Dickinson in the first matchup and it's not going well, and Evan Mahaffey is out there and you're playing super small, to putting two shooters out there and making him defend you and then just doubling every time he touches. That's a pretty drastic change. And I think Penn State fans should be really encouraged that, one, we knew Micah Shrewsbury can make adjustments. We've seen it in game. But to see him make that drastic of an adjustment, to put two guys in the starting lineup who were like limited on minutes, not just like not starting much. They weren't playing much. They weren't coming off the bench much. To see him make that adjustment, I think that is a really positive, like overarching sign moving forward.
Yeah, credit to coach on that, because that's something huge, that to make drastic changes in starting lineups, because you think about kids' egos and confidence, taking guys out of this, because, you know, you put those two in, you're taking guys out and their confidence could, you know, go down, you know. But credit to coach being okay to understand that, hey, we got to do this for this game and this game plan, and we need this to help us win. And it turned out to work in their favor. But also credit to those guys as well for not playing as much, being and put in the starting lineup and being effective the entire game. Both of them, they were effective the entire game. You know, as far as doubling, making shots, you look at it, you'd be like, well, you kind of say, hey, whatever you guys did before that game, whatever you slept, what time you went to sleep, or whatever you ate, you need to continue to do that again, because the way you guys played that game, it was honestly the best game of the season in my opinion, as far as how they competed, how they played from everybody that came in the game.
Yeah, I thought so too. Like you don't see many games where a player as good as Hunter Dickinson looks as bad as he did, right? And like they blew out that Michigan team with Jet Howard being like lights out from deep and lighting them up for a little bit. And they still couldn't, like Michigan still couldn't keep it close, which is just a testament to how good Penn State was that day and how much they were sort of on their game. And those changes are going to be important because they're done playing those two bigs until the Big Ten tournament or potentially the NCAA tournament, right? So now they're back to playing the kind of guys that they want to play. And so now we get to see the adjustment. And this is as good a time as ever to go to the scouting report on these next couple of games because they matter too. They're both rematches. from earlier in this year. One was a win against Nebraska. One was a loss against Wisconsin on the road. But they are flipped right now, right? You've got Nebraska playing Nebraska on the road and playing Wisconsin at home. And I'm curious as your thoughts on this. This to me feels like a stretch where they should go 2-0, right? Like I know you just had a tough loss to Purdue. I know that Wisconsin is a tough team even to face at home, and I know it's hard to win on the road in the Big Ten. But to me, this feels like the stretch where like this is the chance to make up for that home loss and get back to 500 in Big Ten play.
Of course, we've spoken about it before. It's about Penn State we have to start getting some type of streak going. We've been 50-50, win one, lose one, win one, lose one, maybe lose 2 in a row, win 2 in a row. And right now is the time to really start putting on a streak and get ready to, the meat of February and March. And the guys have to come out prepared and ready to go because right now, like you said, these 2 games are winnable games. I think they, like you said, we talked about it a couple of weeks ago, how they should have beat Wisconsin. We felt that they were, capable of beating Wisconsin on the road, and they were right there, questionable calls here and there. But they have to be able to take care of business at home now because, you dropped that game on the road, which was a winnable game. And now you have to take care of business here. And, now you're traveling on the road, and we all know that in Nebraska, we all know winning in the Big Ten on the road is tough. But this is a game. It's a must win. I call it a must win because right now it shows you have to bounce back from Purdue. You are the better team. You need to go out there and show that you are the better team and start this streak because now, hey, you've got the 2 big guys out of the way. Right now you're playing against a lot of players and teams that are what you're used to playing and what you have already on your team. So now they'll be even matched and you guys have to go out there and be able to take care of business because now is the time to really take the game to another notch. And I think that's what coach is saying. And I think that's what the players believe because now it's February and now we're getting this much closer to March and this close to putting out the best resume that they need to be able to make it to the NCAA tournament.
Yeah. And I don't think we need to go too deep on Nebraska and Wisconsin here because we've seen them, right? Like we've seen them play and Penn State has seen them play and fans already know what that looks like. But I think broadly, you're right? Like this is the chance to prove that like not only can you bounce back from Purdue, but you can do it on the road and you can do it against the team that you're supposed to beat. Right, there are only 2 teams in the Big Ten not inside Ken Palm's top 100. Nebraska at 101, Minnesota at 198. Penn State gets both of them on the road. They got to win at least one of them. And to me, I think you got to win both to give yourself a little bit of breathing room for home games because you're going to play Rutgers at home. You're going to play Maryland at home. You're going to play Illinois at home. Like those aren't easy games. If you can go 2-1 in those, steal both road games, you're right back at 500. And listen, we talk about the NCAA tournament all the time. Right now, they're projected to be 19-12 and 10-10 in the Big Ten this year. Mm-hmm. Like that's what they need, right? Like, and they need to win one in the Big Ten tournament. You're at 20 wins, and you're essentially locked into the NCAA tournament. I would think at that point, right? Given I think most programs have that resume would be locked in. I know I like to think that brand recognition won't matter, but listen, we know how this goes sometimes, right? Like sometimes the schools who aren't heralded have to do a little more. And Penn State is definitely not a school that is heralded when it comes to men's basketball, no matter how awesome Tim Frazier was in the early 2010s. Like sometimes it just doesn't carry that decade-long resonance that you want it to.
I know, but I will ask you this. I think this is one of the first times I've seen in a long time in the Big Ten that you don't have 3 or 4 teams ranked in the top 25. And I know I'm jumping ahead of myself, but in March, I think that does play a part, you know what I mean? Because we were so used to seeing the Big Ten have at least 3 or 4 teams in the top 25. So when you do win those games on the road, you're knocking off a top 25 team. And for the last 2 weeks, there's only been one, and it's been Purdue actually somebody else was top 25, but I think now it's only
Indiana hopped into the top 25 and then they lost to Maryland.
Right. So, and I hope this doesn't hurt later on, like what Penn State is trying to do, you know what I mean? Because I believe that it's needed and it has to be done. So hopefully that they're able to take care of business and win these games. And, the other teams as well, some of these guys start creeping in the top 25 to make it that much easier for when, the committee starts to look at it and say, hey, Penn State was able to knock off, some of these guys that are top 25.
Yeah. And like you said, right now it's just Purdue and Indiana. Illinois is kind of on the brink there of getting ranked. Rutgers is getting votes. But to me, I don't have an AP poll vote. I have votes in various things. That is not one of them. I do not know how Rutgers is not a top at least 15 to 20 team in the country, let alone like how they're not ranked at all. Like, I don't know how they are not a top 10 to 15 team in the country. They beat Purdue, right? You know how many other teams have done that this year? None.
Nobody.
And they did it on the road. Like, it's the best win in the country. They have a ton of good wins. They have an elite defense, like legitimately elite. I'm not talking like, oh, like they're really good. They hold Big Ten teams. They could hold any team in the country below 60. Like, they are phenomenal. And they deserve, a bunch of credit and deserve to be ranked, quite frankly. I think it's a bit wild that they aren't ranked. But Illinois is on the fringes there too. They should be in that discussion. Like, I think you're right. I think they need that recognition because, we can look at the advanced metrics and everything like Ken Palm and see that, like, okay, they have 4 teams in that top 25. But do we trust that everyone is looking at those rankings, right? And not just looking at the AP pool? And if people are trusting the AP pool, then like, to me, you got those 4 teams got to be in it at some point. I think Rutgers, like I said, already deserves to be in it. I would have Illinois in. I don't think I would have had Indiana in. I definitely wouldn't have them in after they got beaten pretty badly by Maryland there. But like, they need those numbers next to teams when they beat them. I think that helps whether people like it or not. I think that helps with a narrative. And narrative can be really powerful in sports. It's why a lot of people love it, right? Like why a lot of people love sports in general. Is narrative and like the trajectory teams are on. And so I think they need some of those numbers next to teams. I think they're going to have a chance when Rutgers comes to Happy Valley. I think that should be a ranked matchup. I think it should be for Illinois too by that point. Like I think there's enough time between now and then, about 2 weeks before Illinois goes to Penn State. About 3-4 weeks until Rutgers gets there. So there are going to be chances to get those.
Right.
And I think those will be big in the long run. But you're right. Like this is a year where like there is not a ton of a difference between the second best team of the Big Ten and the 12th best team of the Big Ten. And you know how I know that? Because I don't know who's second and I don't know who's 12th. And if you made an argument for Penn State as 2 and Penn State for 12, you probably have just as much of an argument either way, right? Like you any of those teams could be anywhere in those standings. I'm not going to pretend to know. I'm pretty confident right now that Rutgers is the number 2 team in the conference. That being said, now that I've said that, I'm sure they'll go lose like 3 in a row just to make me look like an idiot. That's how these things tend to seem to go. But yeah, like this is a year where there's so much parity that it might end up hurting the conference in the end. Like usually the strength in the conference is helpful. But like I think like it's almost too good this year, right? I know it's going to sound weird, but like the Big Ten is almost too good where they're beating up on themselves on each other too much, and you're kind of in a rough place because of it, And right now in the standings, Illinois and Rutgers tied in conference record. Illinois, I believe, has the tiebreaker there. But like, are you going to be surprised if one of those teams is like 11 in a week and a half? Like, I won't be, because I think there's like 2 games that separate it. So it's messy and it's like it's a weird year. And listen, Penn State's right in the thick of it. Can you ask for much more at this point, really?
No, I think you want to be right in the mix, and that's where Penn State is. Man, they jump up 2 spots, then they lose. They jump, they go back down 2 spots, but they're right in the mix. Obviously, you will want to be higher. I'm sure they maybe you want to be in around the 3, 4, 5, 6 range. But all that can change. How you just spoke on it. Hey, they win these next 2 games, and now we're sitting at a record of 7-6 in the conference. So and that'll put you up higher enough and higher in the rankings of the top 10 at least, or top 8. And I said it last week, and I say it again. And the best thing for Penn State is to be the best team they can be at the end. And so they're going to have bumps in the road, like you said. Purdue on the road is a bump in the road. It was hard for them to be able to go out there and get that win. They fought hard, but they have winnable games now, and they have to take care of business to be able to do that. And in order to do that, you have to start putting some wins together, putting some streaks together to be able to be the best team you could be going into the Big Ten Conference tournament, be able to make some noise there, and then hopefully and fortunately they'll be able to get into the NCAA tournament and do the same.
Yeah, and they're here right now because of Jalen Pickett and because of their shooting, and they need that to carry on the road. And I think that's the main takeaway that maybe last night didn't go so well against Purdue. But if they're going to shoot better on the road, they're going to have better chances. If Pickett's going to, he didn't have his greatest game last night. He played well, but like this is a guy that is, has a chance to be the National Player of the Year in college basketball, right? He's in the top 20, I think, finals for the Wooden Award. He's awesome. and he's going to take him as far as they're going to go, and so will the shooting. So I think when you look at it, when you can sort of take the 1,000-foot view, and how they're going to get there, it's got to be on his back. It's got to be on the back of the shooting. It's got to be around those post ups. And listen, I know Edey and Dickinson can make some people look at the team and be like, they're not big enough. They're not going to do it. I have good news. There are not many teams that have 7'4" or 7'1" centers in college basketball. Most teams are closer to 6'10" and 6'11".
Yeah,
you do not have to worry about this most of the rest of the season. Now, you run into those guys in the Big Ten tournament, might be an issue again. But I think for the time being, like, they've kind of cleared off the most difficult matchups on the schedule, and now they can go the rest of the way and be themselves. Not to say they weren't being themselves against those two teams, but they're the matchups where they probably have to stray most from who they want to be, right? And that's defensively, to be clear. Offensively, they're just going to do what they always do, pull those guys out to the perimeter and start gunning from deep and make as many as they can. But I think the rest of the way now they're in position to be who they are, to put Jalen Pickett in the post with 4 shooters around him and fire away.
Yeah. And that's the game plan. And that's always been a game plan, I think, since, game one. And you talk about the non-conference. It's to let Pickett be himself and put him around all these shooters and do what they do. Obviously, we talk about it. We saw in the Michigan game how beautiful they played. Guys are making threes left and right. Obviously, it's such a great game because we talk about Thon and what Thon means, and for them to be able to show up to how they did and play the way they did. Obviously, a big congrats to them for that. And the shooters are going to be the shooters, but I know we talk about Pickett, and he's going to have to carry a lot on his back. But I always, and I've been saying this, I think it's on Funk, it's on Dredd, it's on those guys to be able to help him because, like you said, even last night, Pickett didn't play well, but he still played decent. He had good numbers. But we need those other guys to be able to show up and play well. They have to make shots for him. And if we want to see how far this Penn State team can go, those guys have to step up and be consistent because we kind of already know what we're getting from Pickett. He's going to be great. Like you said, he's a Wooden Award finalist. He's going to do what he needs to do. Those other guys, that's what we're trying to see. What are we going to get out of those guys on a night in, night basis to where that's going to help this team go to the next level.
Yeah, and you're right. It's got to be, I think, the veterans at this point, and maybe this is something we can get into next week as I make you, the listener, come back for more next week when we'll talk about the freshmen and stuff. But for now, I think the veterans are where they need to get some of that from, right? Yeah. Because the freshmen kind of aren't there. And like I said, we can dive into that later about why that's the case. But for the time being, it's got to be Dredd. It's got to be Funk. It's got to be Lundy. It's got to be all of those guys. They got to be fully maximized because I think right now you're looking at 7 guys you can play and trust. And that's not a great place to be, right? Now, Pickett will play 40 minutes a night. He's done it before. It's kind of crazy. I feel bad for him walking off the court because, like, he's just kind of trudging along, right? Like the kind of walk that I have after playing 18 holes of golf as if I've just run a marathon. He's actually running that much, right? And in that kind of pain. And you can see it, right? That it's exhausting. And, he's playing a ton. And those guys are going to have to play some heavy minutes because, it's February 2nd. It is getting to the time where you have to decide who's in the rotation and who's out. And I know Micah Shrewsbury said that he wanted guys to step up and take roles, but if they're not there yet, they're not there. And at some point you have to decide to not cut your losses, but be ready for, like, this is what we've got the rest of the year and this is what we're rolling with. Development matters, but not as much as winning the next game, I think, for this team. And I think so that's got to be the case moving forward, that they prioritize those wins, right? And there was a time in the year for sort of mixing and matching both and trying to balance it. I think now it's got to lean heavily toward doing whatever you can to win games, even the slightest margin. Like, let's say a senior is better than a freshman by the slightest margin, where maybe earlier in the year you play that freshman and you get him and try and get him to surpass the senior. I think you're probably past that point and where you need to play these older guys and whoever's playing their best. And to their credit, they have changed the rotation. To Shrewsbury's credit and the coaching staff's credit, they've changed the rotation as they've needed to and put guys in. But right now, you said it. I think they got to lean on the vets.
Yeah, and it's winning time. And right now, winning time is you can't afford losses, especially games that you're supposed to win. So the only thing you can do is play the guys that are going to put you in the best position to win. And like I said, if that's 4 or 5 guys playing 40 minutes, then obviously you don't want that, and that's not your ideal situation. But at the end of the day, when you look at it, when the game's over, all you want to see is a W in the column. So that's the only thing that you can work for and go for. And right now, you're gonna have to use those guys and ride on those veterans that have been there and played a long time.
Yeah, and I think that's a good pivot point to the word on campus here. Those guys are gone next year, right? Those guys that you're going to lean on, and we're talking about how much they have to lean on. And one of those guys is also Jalen Pickett. He's not coming back next year, and so then you have to start looking to how this roster is constructed moving forward, how you go about getting the next wave, the next elite player, next top 20 player in the country potentially. How you get that guy on the roster, and I think a lot of that at this point, and I think it's pretty clear, is going to have to be through the transfer portal. Which brings us to the sort of crux of a lot of issues for Penn State right now, and that's name, image, and likeness, right? Mm-hmm. And that's where this program is at with their sort of funding and the collectives that back them. Micah Shrewsbury went on a podcast with Nate Bauer of On3 and said that they're 14th out of 14 in NIL. I've talked to people within the program who have said they're 14th out of 14 when it comes to NIL. And I understand that some fans want to do it a certain way and want things to go their way a certain way and to recruit guys who want to be there. Guys can make money and they should want to make that money, right? And I think until Penn State catches up from that standpoint, Shrewsbury is going to be operating at a deficit through no fault of his own, assuming he's trying to get out there and fundraise for things like Successful, right? That they're doing what they can within the rules to help them out. Until they reach that level of backing from donors and fans and support in general, I think they're going to be playing at a deficit. And it's one of those things that you look at and you wonder if they can get Carey Booth, Calvin Booth's son, high 4-star top 100 kid, if they can get in the past guys like Keba Jai and convince Jalen Pickett to transfer there without much NIL support. What they can do with real NIL support is do some serious damage. Rutgers got a 5-star recruit in the 2024 class. Let me say that one more time. Rutgers got a 5-star recruit in the 2024 class. The world of NIL can change things for a program drastically. And I think that has got to be, I know we're focused on the season right now, but the roster construction next year matters, and you kind of have to start planning that now, because in a month and a half, Penn State season is going to be over, even if they make the tournament, right? They're probably not making it that far into it. Maybe a Sweet 16 appearance is kind of the upside there. You got to start planning now. And I think you got to look into what that looks like and how you get there. And right now, the avenues for Penn State to get there aren't as broad as they are for other teams because they just kind of don't have that backing from the outside.
Whole times have changed, man. NIL, that wasn't, what is that back when I was playing? Can I get some of that action too? Can I make a little money back when I was playing? I had mixed emotions about it, John, honestly, about the NIL. But, it is what it is. And sometimes you gotta play with the cards that you're dealt. And right now, the NIL is something that's hot, and it's a hot commodity. And throughout the whole country in every sport, NIL is being used and basically recruiting players. And in order for Penn State, one of our biggest things for being in Penn State basketball is recruiting. We've always had the issues of getting guys to come there, because we were fighting against other teams that are, might have, the bigger name or just the bigger cities or whatever, just close by. We've always, had to fight to be able to get guys there. And obviously basketball comes first. The winning is going to take care of that. And, Penn State has been doing well, and they got to continue to do well. And like you said, you get another NCAA tournament notch or run in your belt. Obviously that helps tremendously. And the NIL is something that needs to be icing on the cake. Like you said, the guys have been able to, I think Shrewsbury's done a great job of getting guys that are already committed to next year. Though if you add NIL to that, that's just icing on top of the cake. That's a cherry on top of the sundae. You're able to work with more avenues of getting guys where Penn State might not have the money to be able to, or in the NIL to be able to go out there and use that, compared to, you speak about other teams in the Big Ten where they can actually bring that to the table. Hey, we made to the tournament also, where this team, and we had this too, to be able to give to, put a little icing on it. And that's a tough thing to follow. And I understand that some fans are just like, well, we want them to come because they want to come, and and they want to be part of something special. And I understand that. But at the end of the day, getting an NIL is special. It's something special that, for right now that's going on in the world of college sports. Having an NIL is something special that they are able to make money, be able to provide for families. And why not? why not? So I think that we'll always be a step behind until, we start to become, start inching up the ladder of starting to be able to get guys and use some of that NIL. I'm not talking about we need to give guys millions of dollars, and that's where, I told you I'm indifferent. I'm not sure how I feel about it, because I just think that, you're giving an 18-year-old kid that amount of money is not good for them or, their health and especially in the long run. Because, that fire and desire to be able to go out there and compete, to be able to want to make that money at the highest level, it still has to be there. And you start giving kids that in college, you kind of lose that fire and desire. But Penn State has to be able to get that in some way to be able to help in the recruiting piece, especially if they want this team to be able to sustain being good for long periods of time.
Yeah, and I think, you bring up a good point with like how getting that, like sort of getting a lump sum can impact a kid, right?
Yes.
The way I always view it is it's giving the money to a family, right? That potentially could need it, right? Because you never know. People have hundreds of thousands of different backgrounds, whatever. Like families need that help sometimes, right? And I think, that's, the kids with guidance and like with good support systems, like it will work out well. Some kids it might not, but they deserve the opportunity to have it not work out well, right? Like to make some of that piece of the pie, because we know that this is a $1 billion enterprise. Yeah. And we know that's true because they wouldn't be doing it if it wasn't, right? Like all of college sports, they would not be continuing with the NCAA tournament for the love of the game. I can assure you that it is entirely a money based industry at this point, and like guys deserve a cut of that, because at the end of the day, you guys are the ones earning that money, right? Like no one's going to watch me play 5-on-5. I promise, right? Like this is about you guys and the level of play that you've reached, and so I think getting a cut of that is a good thing. I do think that Penn State, until they get that level, is not going to take the next step. Like they could be a consistent bubble team, I think, with their current level, but they're never going to be more unless they continue, improving in NIL or start improving in NIL, I guess. And I think that's a problem, right? Because I can tell you right now, without a shadow of a doubt, that they have lost recruits in this past cycle because of NIL, right? Like there are recruits that they would have had they been able to put together some kind of NIL package that was either comparable or near what other programs were able to. Yeah. And these are good players. These are players that would help this program. And until they can do that, they're going to struggle to reach that level. They're going to struggle to reach those heights that other programs do. And that's true in the portal too, by the way. I'm curious, if Jalen Pickett were a transfer right now, I wonder if he would come to Penn State. I know he wanted to be close to his family. I know that was important to him. And maybe that would have outweighed everything else. But man, some teams would have come calling. Because that was the beginning of NIL, right? That's when where people were still figuring things out. We didn't really know how it was going. Now we kind of know. And some teams would have called. And there probably would have been enough money involved to have his family at every game anyways, right? No matter where he was, would be my guess. Because he is that good of a player that he could have gotten pretty much as he would have wanted in the portal. So I think, fans may point to that and be like, well, they can get Pickett. Why can't they do that with other guys? I think it was a little earlier in the process, and that's why things were different then. And that's not to say guys they've gotten haven't been effective, right? Like Andrew Funk has been awesome this year. Cameron Winter's been helpful at times like this. They've been able to get guys, but you want to get the best guys, you better have a real package to offer. And I think until they get there, they're going to struggle to find that consistency as a program, because right now they can sell that they have a head coach that helped develop Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown and a bunch of other dudes. Impacted Evan Turner and Tim Frazier tremendously in his career, right? Like had those levels of impact across the basketball landscape. But like that only gets you so far, because kids want what other kids are getting. They're going to look at like other 4-star kid who's also in the top 100 going to school Y and be like, well, why can't I get that if I go here? Why wouldn't I just go there or go somewhere else where I can get that? And, maybe figure out the rest later. Now, that being said, we've seen some portal and NIL stuff converge with guys being offered maybe some lump sums or some financial help and not getting it. And then an entire recruiting classes nearly in other sports enter the transfer portal. I don't want to name specific schools, but it has happened, right? Where those things kind of fall apart and you leave yourself a little vulnerable. But I think, Penn State needs NIL help, but they need it to be sturdy too. And I think that matters. And I think it's going to be interesting to watch, right? Because there's only so much like people like Michael Shrewsbury can go on podcasts and say that he wants the help, but there's only so much he can do, right, until people actually help. So I think as we get closer to the off season, this is going to be like the focus for me. Like, what does turning the page look like? Because again, as much as fans should and will enjoy, I think, the rest of this season, you kind of always have that eye forward, right? I always joke about when the Eagles won the Super Bowl in 2018, is the 2017 season. I said, this is going to be great, but like, go win it next year. I was realistic. I actually said, give them 5 years. And here we are 5 years later. I'm just saying.
Sure, you did. Sure, you said 5 years. Sure, you did.
Yeah. Yeah, I gave him like 6 minutes. 6 minutes, maybe 7 minutes before I wanted another one. But no, I think, that's going to be crucial, right? And I think fans they're probably more involved now in program building than ever before. And like, this is a chance to be a part of that. And they can choose to, they can choose not to. But I think either way, it will dictate kind of where things go from here. And I think it's going to be really interesting to watch. And I know something you and I will be keeping an eye on moving forward. But I think that's a good place to leave it this week. We covered a lot of ground. This team is going to be a lot of fun to watch here down the home stretch. You can continue interacting with us on Twitter at Jon Sauber and at Tim Frazier 23. Again, I will say it one more time. Tweet at Tim constantly, please. But actually, ask him questions. Ask me questions. Ask both of us on questions on Twitter at Jon Sauber, at Tim Frazier 23 that you have, and we'll cover them in the podcast. Feel free to reach out to us that way. You can find the podcast wherever you're listening right now, or you can find it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. You can find it on YouTube at Beyond Big Ten. You can find it on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok at Beyond the Big Ten, 10 spelled out written out 10 number form. Thank you for tuning in, and have a great day.
Beyond the Big Ten is a network of podcasts that aims to be your go-to resource for all things Big Ten. We cover the entire conference with shows hosted by ex-players and athletic alumni, aiming to be your go-to source of information and entertainment for your favorite team. Hosted by ex-Big Ten players, media, and insiders, our podcasts are focused on giving diehard fans and those alums an inside scoop about the teams and people that make the Big Ten Conference one of the most watched and most talked about conferences in sports. We're excited to talk Big Ten basketball with you wherever you may be. Subscribe now.